Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the best show of the best shows, where we talk about everything from comic books to whatever else is going on in this crazy world. You're now listening to For Canon's Sake. So whether you're a normie, a wannabe expert, or wannabe try-hard, get in here. And now, for your very handsome host, this is Mr. Eric July.
Welcome to yet another episode of For Canon's Sake. It's been a while. Still getting this thing set up for the live viewers who are watching this on their PC, phone, or what have you. This whole wall over here is blank because I'm not done. But the timing thing, there was no way I was going to miss this interview. We have a very special guest. You know, I've been doing these videos if you've been paying attention over to YouTube, youtube.com/YoungWorber59. And if you've been watching me over at YouTube, I've had this series going through some of the episodes now that we have it available on Disney Plus. And it was only a matter of time before I reached out to them myself. And because they are really connected to the show, they have an audience now that is, well, they've always had an audience, but it's growing because of the new hype surrounding the animated series, X-Men, the animated series. That's what we're discussing. So what did I do for today's episode of For Canon's Sake? I am talking to both Eric and Julia Lewald, about their experience. I reached out to them, said let's make it happen. We got the scheduling locked in, and that's what this episode is about. That's the direction I wanted to take For Canon's Sake. I've always wanted to take that was the whole direction. It wasn't to be a political sort of podcast or anything like that, or a show. That was never the anticipation. I have another show that's specifically designed for that. I wanted to talk about more of the entertainment, more of the art, and so forth. So I'm going to be discussing X-Men, the animated series, as well as some upcoming material. We have a couple of books, or books that's already out, and we've got another coming later this year in 2020 in October. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Again, welcome back, guys, to For Canon's Sake. As mentioned in the intro, I am joined by Eric and Julia Lewald. How are you guys doing? And I big time fan, by the way, and I appreciate you joining me.
Well, thanks, Eric.
And thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you. So let's just get right into it. If you could, all of us know. I want to know for sure how you guys got the gig itself and being involved with X-Men, the animated series, and just what the overall experience just was. Just lay it all on me.
Well, we've both been out here in Hollywood a while. Julia came out from Texas. I came out from Tennessee, back, in the early 80s. And so we've been working on these shows a long time.
Each of us in turn coming out here to try and crack the Hollywood nut.
We met at Disney in the late 80s. We were both on staff there, did the Disney Afternoon. And that's where we met and got together and got married, thought about to have a kid. And then this X-Men show comes up, and which ended up being the best show either one of us ever worked for out here. But we didn't know it at the time. We just, okay, here's another opportunity. Here's something to pay the rent.
We had finished our contract terms at Disney, each of us, and had entered the wonderful world of freelance gigging, trying to get hired from someone. And you had just gotten a job wrap up doing...
Yeah, doing Beetlejuice for Fox.
Okay.
And so I'd done a year. I'd run a year of the writing of the scripts for the Beetlejuice show for Fox. It was a brand new little bitty network. It wasn't, tenth the size of the other big networks, ABC and CBS and NBC. And they're trying to get a name for themselves and get noticed. And the lady in charge there, Margaret Lesh,
president of Fox
Kids, had been trying for 10 years to get an X-Men show on the air. That was her dream.
Because she, at that time, for Marvel.
Yeah, during the 80s, she worked for Marvel, and they couldn't get everybody in Hollywood just said, oh, nobody's going to watch some show based on Marvel cartoon character, comic book characters. What, are you kidding me?
No one knows who they are.
No one knows who they are.
And that's crazy to imagine that. And like today, thinking that's amazing.
Yeah, so they were all wrong, and she was right. And so when she finally got the chance, by chance, I had worked for her and her right-hand man, Sidney Iwander, a couple times on a couple things.
Including Beetlejuice.
Mm-hmm. And so when push came to shove and they had to decide, whose tone or whose style or who they thought might be best to be in charge of writing on the show, Sidney picked me. And he picked me like hours. He called me the night before, the Sunday night before we started. We got together with like 30 people from Stan Lee and Marvel and Fox and the production people and animators and everybody. All had a big meeting on the next Monday morning, and I got told the night before, guess what? You're going to be in charge of developing this show for our network and running the scripts. And I said, X-Men, it's a comic book, right? And so I just had to kind of shut up and listen during that big meeting the next day, and kind of held my tongue, and we hit the ground running. We were 2-3 months behind when we started and didn't have much time or much money, and we just leapt in. And luckily, all of the creative people were basically feeling pretty much the same way about the show. They wanted it to be serious. They wanted it to be the show that nobody had ever done before for Saturday morning for kids, something more adult, something more that respected the books. And
that's amazing.
Marvel just was kind of, they're a small company back then. They'd seen half a dozen other attempts at doing their characters, and none of them worked out well. So they didn't have very high hopes for us. Mm-hmm. But luckily, half the people involved in the show, most of the artists, loved the X-Men, knew them backwards and forwards. So we had people on board that knew everything, about them and what they should be. And Mark Edens, who's a buddy of mine from Tennessee, from college, who's like the head writer for me. Also out here in California. He and I laid out the first couple seasons of the show, and we learned them real quick. But we did rely on the kindness of our coworkers to tell us when we had a misstep.
And I want to jump in and remind people that we're talking. It was February 1992 when you got this phone call and went in.
I was 2 years old.
Internet. There's no Google. I can't Google anything about the X-Men. There's no comic book store open. I can't run down.
Yeah.
We communicated through fax machines and snail mail.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the speed of light back then.
Now, fortunately, Will Mineo and Larry Houston on the art side of things had been working at Marvel with Margaret Loesch for a number of years, and they were both big X-Men fanboys, and were able to sort of talk to you about what the X-Men were. In terms of sort of learning, well, what is it, the whole thing that we're trying to get going here?
But at the same time, they had to spend 70, 80 hours a week drawing all this stuff, designing the world and getting characters ready and getting the props.
You got a photocopy, a black and white photocopy from Larry Houston. What was the document?
Yeah, there was a Marvel Universe book that would come out about every 5 or 6 years, and I think we had a 1988 version.
Larry had a copy,
and so he made a Xerox for me that had all the characters and all the relationships and whose power was what and what they meant to each, who'd been good and bad and when they'd been good and bad. So there's some heavy reading there, but it got me fast, and it was just nice to be among a bunch of people. Where most of us in probably our mid-30s at the time, and we'd been through shows where we thought we had a good show, but the people above us just really didn't care. Mm-hmm. The toy company or the money behind it said, no, we dumb it down, whatever. Mm-hmm. And time after time over the years that we'd all been in this business, we'd kind of felt, we'd come short, we'd done our best, but we'd let things compromise. And so there was a group of people that were just kind of ready to say, no more. Mm-hmm. And no, I don't care what you say. I don't care if your advertiser friend who's putting up $500,000 says that he wants younger sounding scripts with a funny dog in it. We're going to tell the stories like they do in the current books, and if you don't like it, you can fire us. And so there was a lot of that attitude going around. Yep. And so because it takes about 7-8 months from the time you decide to do an animated story till it's back And at least back then, all that stuff's hand painted. Every 30 second of that show is hand painted, and layers of these people. And X-Men was a big, ambitious show with half a dozen people fighting half a dozen other people throughout space or blowing up cities or whatever. So it was a difficult show. It was for our animators to get right. It was a new thing for the voice people, because the voice people were used to doing little kid shows.
Mm-hmm.
So when we first did it, we got a tape back. They did the voices in Toronto, Canada, because they had a better deal up there
financially.
For voices up there, but we got it back and it sounded like X-Men Scooby-Doo, and it was terrible. The show just would have died. And so we sat down and Margaret said, "No, we're not going to put this on the air until we get it right." And spent 2 weeks recasting and re-recording till it sounded like what we were hearing in our heads.
A quick aside here, Toronto has a really rich theater community. And once you guys received that first audio tape, which was a cassette, which was sent to you in the mail, and you heard it, and it's like, oh my God, what do we do? Then the call went out to the talent in the theater pool there in Toronto that we need folks who have the gravitas for this show. It is a cartoon, but this matters.
And so we got a bunch of people that are used to doing Shakespeare,
right.
where we normally, people probably wouldn't have bothered. And it was a kind of an overreaction on our part to, oh my God, we've heard how bad it can be. We got to bust our ass to get this thing right.
And to this day, listen, I love me some Hugh Jackman, but I'm telling you, I still hear Cal Dodd in my head as Wolverine when I'm Wolverine, or
George
as Beast, or Lenore Zan as Rogue. All these.
I think that's iconic. I don't think anybody else can do Rogue. Like, I think that's every time we hear, like, there's nobody else that I can hear. And this came, and I was talking to my audience about this actually, a few months ago, about how I'm rewatching. Definitely once the announcement of Disney Plus came, I'm rewatching all of the episodes as an adult, because I was a kid. I was, when the show first hit air, I was only 2 years old, because I turned 30 next month. So I was a youngster, and I remember watching it, but processing it now as an adult, it's a completely just different experience. And I think a lot of other people agree that that's why it aged so well, because it's like me now, as a guy that's consumed so much comic book, media over the years, all the old stuff, all the new stuff that came out when I was a kid. And it just, the appreciation for it grows. And I think this is what sets it aside from a lot of different, like, let's say, Marvel movies or things that are done of this nature. Even on the DC side, I'm always talking about the source material, and how it was really, the animated series brought some of these classic arcs to life. And we could see it in more so this cartoon form. And some of these had a lot of depth, with Claremont's definitely era. Some of this was just, it was almost, I couldn't understand it until I got older, right? And really understanding it, like, oh man, this is a lot deeper than what it is that I initially thought. So was the plan to, as you guys were writing it, was that the original goal? Was it to, let's say, have this age as well as it possibly could? Because I do know that you mentioned having all of these guys who knew X-Men like the back of their hand, and they had to have known that some of this stuff it's not targeted specifically for kids. They can consume it, but it's not targeted specifically for kids. So was that the original goal as you guys are writing this out and seeing this sort of come to fruition? Was it to have it age definitely as the audience aged?
Well, okay, again, going back, it's 1992.
Right.
The absolute state-of-the-art technology was videotape and VCRs. And there were 4 major networks and syndication channels, and cable was just kind of getting started. Where we are now is light years away from where we were then in terms of, this could live on forever in a service, or this could. So I don't recall on the writing side being conscious of write this as though it will last forever. But from the other angle, it was, you want to do it as as well as you can, make it as good as you can. You wanted it to last forever, even though it was a Saturday morning kids show.
Right.
We were always given the marching orders as the writers. You do not write down to this audience. You make this as sophisticated. You write up, you know, as dramatic. It happens to be a half-hour animated show for kids, but we are treating it like a 1 hour drama for adults.
Yeah, and we were writing for ourselves. That was something that we learned from the best people in the business. We met people that have written for shows. You look back, it's hard to imagine, but like even Bullwinkle had some really sophisticated stuff.
Absolutely.
And you talk to those people, and some of the Warner Brothers cartoons from the 30s and the 40s that used to go for the Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck cartoons in front of the movies. There's some sophisticated stuff in there, and you read their histories and you talk to the people, the retired folks that did those, and they said they were writing them for themselves. They knew what limits they had in terms of the fact that most of their audience was going to be kids. But within those limits, they weren't writing for some imagined 5-year-old that some child psychologist had told them to write towards. They were writing to make themselves laugh and to make themselves get excited. Yep. And we took that same thing. We'd like to do that on other shows. 9 times out of 10, you don't get the opportunity to do that. You'll get direction from above saying, well, we have a child psychologist on board, and we don't think that they understand 80% of what you've got in the script here. Please, cut it all out or make it that much simpler. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it was the executives at Fox, those people we mentioned, Sidney Atwater and
Starting with Margaret Lesh.
And then our censor, who was this wonderful lady, because every TV show has a censor.
Broadcast standards and practices.
Her name was Avery Coburn, and she liked the comic books. Okay. She liked stories. She understood storytelling. And so she let us get away with all sorts of things that anybody else at the time in kids television wouldn't have let in. First week, I call her and say, we're going to kill one of the main X-Men in the first story.
Huh?
And she's, okay, let's talk this through, Eric. Come on.
But your point to that
was... But the point was, it was important. We needed to show that they weren't play acting at the violence and intensity and the things that were going on in the show, that there was a consequence to being an X-Men, that there was heroic sacrifice involved in being an X-Men. And we couldn't do it unless we sacrificed somebody. And so Morph was there to get killed. Yeah. And she had to work it through. I think she probably talked to her boss, and we established a little bit of a trust. And we'd actually established some trust on Beetlejuice. I'd gone through 20 scripts with her on Beetlejuice. So she knew I was, kind of a man of my word, and I wouldn't be trying to sneak something past her, and that I was serious about this. So we got that in, and there are other things like the Nightcrawler episode where it's all about God and faith.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for a Saturday morning kids show, that was astonishing.
And it came down to being thoughtful about it and to talking to her ahead of time and spending a week or two respecting her position and saying, what is it that we can do and we can't do? These are our intentions. We want to try this. And having her say, okay, let's go back and forth. And I've got, notes from her about stuff that couldn't go in or stuff that she felt just didn't quite feel comfortable with, but we'd find a middle ground where it would make us both happy. And that made it a great relationship. She made that show possible.
Yes.
It wouldn't have the show it was if it weren't for her.
Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing just going through some of these episodes as an adult, and you can obviously tell that you didn't write down to the 2-year-old me, right? That was watching that show. And I think, again, that's a lot of frustrations with certainly myself. This is why I don't think a lot of, let's say, animated, definitely American animated, like just whether it be a film, TV shows, they don't stand the test of time and transcend generations because of that. I think a lot of stuff, even if you turn your TV on now, you could see some animation. You'd be like, yeah, that's maybe cool for this 3-year-old. And but after that, like, nobody's really going to pay attention to that. And very seldom do we get those like the X-Men animated series. So it's like no matter what age you are, it's like it gets sweeter, like as I'm aging. I have my own personal experience, and then watching the dynamic between some of the other characters, and definitely knowing the stories. It's very, very impactful, and I think that's what so many guys that were fans and grew up on this TV show, really appreciate it. And now that we have a chance to really watch it again, like I do, it's just the level of appreciation is just it's like the beacon, right? We're looking at that like, okay, everything else has to like pales in comparison, or we're trying to compare it to, because it was a perfect mix. And I mean this sincerely, like it was a good mix of, okay, we're bringing this to life, but it respected the source material. And that's what guys like myself as a comic book fan, we want. It's not to say that it has to be verbatim exactly like the comic book, but we want the source material to be appreciated. And obviously that was the goal. We could see that.
And a lot of people think that the show, the 5-season run, there weren't that many direct adaptations of the comic books, but people often say, "Oh my God, those comic book stories were so great." They weren't comic book stories; they were our attempt to interpret the comic book world into an animated series, because those are different muscles, and
they move in different ways.
Absolutely.
Paces they got, and there's some, I don't know if I could write a good comic book. I mean, it's a craft.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what you're talking. When I say that if you pick up one that's really great and it's just written beautifully and drawn beautifully, it just takes you away. Mm-hmm. And that there's a skill and a pace to that, and when to be inside the character's head, when to not, when to move, when to not, and we had to try to look at these comics and say, well, what will make them into good moving pictures?
Yep.
And that was the challenge, because we weren't, we didn't know if we could do it. We thought we could, and so we thought of them more as a TV show first that pulled elements from the books, rather than adaptations of the books, and that, I think, gave us the flexibility to use as much material of the books as we could possibly find, but keep the writers focused on writing TV episodes, not comic book translations.
But it's highly flattering that people feel it was so consistent. We finally got to meet Chris Claremont.
There you go.
Last year.
Last year, after all this time, it's funny, we hadn't met him, and
that's crazy.
And he's like he was the happiest guy alive. He was just thrilled that somebody finally got the books right. He said,
because I wrote the Days of Future Past Part 1 episode in the first season, and when we were all told, well, okay, Marvel's getting the vibe here. Can you consider taking this story and translating it? Because the rest of the episodes, I mean, yes, they were all things you and Mark had crafted at our dining room table that were not direct adaptations of the book. We were originally calling it present tense. Future tense, because we didn't know if we were going to get ultimate permission to call it Days of Future Past, because that is such an iconic series.
Because we had to change some of the characters, and we had to
like Bishop. I know Bishop took place of Kitty and all that. Yeah.
So I was always concerned, spent the last 25 years concerned that Chris Claremont hated us, but then got to meet him, and he was really nice. So yay!
He was a happy guy to see that what we'd end up doing with so many of the good stories that we pulled from were stuff that he'd come up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's all that I think a lot of comic book fans want. And that's why we have some of our frustrations, not only just with movies, but even with television as well. It's not that I don't think I've ever met a comic book guy that was like, this book or this TV show or this movie needs to be exactly like just exactly like it. We just wanted to be respected and not to veer so far off from the character that they're unrecognizable. Definitely, you spend all of this time, all of these years reading this material, you're telling your friends about it, you hear there's a movie made, and then you're left with that sort of disappointment. It's like, well, that's not the character that I understood. But watching X-Men, you don't get that at all. The characters feel like the characters, and it really embodies some of the characters, and even becomes iconic in its own way. So it still has that element of surprise in terms of it being sort of fresh, being sort of new, because it's not a direct adaptation, but it's we all appreciate it, and we all compare it to it. Definitely, I'm watching it, I'm like, this is just giving me more evidence as to you can respect the source material while also writing something new, writing something fresh for the audience, and that's what we all appreciate from you guys. But I want to spend the good half of our talk today speaking about the upcoming things that you guys have. There's this new sort of everybody's stoked on the X-Men again because of Disney Plus, right? Disney Plus allowed us to just dive in and binge watch all 5 seasons of it, right? Just so everybody's talking about it on all sorts of social media. So we got a couple. I know we have Eric. You wrote a book earlier. If you can tell us about that, and then let's go into what we got coming in October.
Okay. Woohoo! Okay. Well, the first book, which came out in November of 2017, is called Previously on X-Men, which is
the making of an animated series.
The making of an animated series, and what it is, it's a really dense, long. I interviewed 36 people. I interviewed the cast, the artists.
It's a deep book.
The executives, everybody that got the show on the air, everybody that had an important place in making sure that it was right. Writers. Video editors, everybody that had a creative or business or just personal professional contribution to the show. There's an interview of in there, and then there's details about kind of the core of it is a history of getting the show made from that first night where we get the phone call saying you're going to be doing the X-Men till the last day of the last season, where that last season things were kind of tight and they cut the budgets in half and it looks different, and it's the design different, and they spent, it. So all the decision making that went into things, the half dozen times where, as often happens on TV shows, it could have fallen apart. Could either have been just stopped dead, or it could have been turned into something really different or poor. There's all those chances on the show, and there were about
just to give you an idea.
It's a deep book. About half a dozen of those major crises, but then once to our surprise and gratification, it comes out in January, and it's a #1 show on TV. Fox was this little bitty network. They'd never been anything but fourth. They were distant fourth.
And they were new. They were brand new.
And so, the numbers would usually be like 30%, 30%, 30%, and Fox would get 10%.
Max.
And after X-Men was on for 3 or 4 weeks, X-Men was getting more than the 3 other networks put together.
Nice.
And so it was this huge thing. Everybody loved it. Everybody was so, okay, let's do another episode. We'd all been let go. They'd had so little hope that this was going to be success that the entire creative cast of writers and artists had been let go to work on other projects.
Because they assumed it was going to crash and burn. So they never had a successful show like this before.
So it finally comes out. It works. They frantically try to call most of us back. A couple of them couldn't come back, but most of us could.
Oh, but speaking of, in a desperate attempt to find work during that down period, you ended up with Mark and Michael Eden's on.
I don't know if you know the show Exo Squad, but while we were waiting for to find out if there's going to be a second season of X-Men, Will Mineo, Larry Houston, and the two Edens brothers, Mark and Michael, are my 2 buddies from college, writing partners, and I went and we did the first season. We wrote and started drawing the first season of Exo Squad while we were waiting to see if they'd pick up a second season of X-Men. Nice. So when they did, Will and Mark and Michael stayed back with Exo Squad, and Larry and I went back to X-Men, and we got them back pretty quickly, but for a while there, we lost some of our better people, and had to kind of scramble. But that just shows you out here, it's weird. You work on a project, and then it's maybe 2-3 months till it premieres, and you just don't know. Nobody knows if it's gonna work with people or not, if people are gonna love it or not. Yeah. So, but then it did, and then all those all the questions we were getting about, it's too old, or kids won't get it, all those questions went away. Everybody just shut up, let us do it from then on in. From episode 14 onward, it was we got to write stories we wanted to without a lot of second guessing and a lot of, can't you make this younger or funnier?
Now, not to be what is the word, ungrateful. Mm-hmm. But from where I was on the side of things, the irony was #1 hit. Fox Kids is getting the biggest ratings of all time. X-Men's going forward. Yay! You get to go work on more episodes. Well, this is fantastic news. Said, but guess what? We're cutting your writer's fee by $500. Wait, what?
Wow.
Figure. Wait, the payday's coming in. Wait, what? It's like, well, and the response was from the folks in charge of the money, there's a line of people out the door who want to write for a #1 hit, and they'll take less. So the choice is yours.
I got you.
It's like, but it's so the annoyance that the folks who wrote the show meant nothing to the show.
Yeah.
In terms of, you're just a cog, we can replace you.
It was
that was unpleasant. But that's Hollywood.
Yeah. But that's a little bit of Hollywood education there. But to be honest, we would have done it for half the price.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, don't tell.
No, we'll keep that between us.
We were having such a good time, and they were letting us write our stories the way we wanted to. So we were really into it, and then it really took off from there.
Oh, so what happened though was 1992, 1997 for the X-Men show. During that time, Marvel was not making a lot of really smart fiscal decisions.
They're a little company going bankrupt.
They were going bankrupt.
Right.
So the rights got sort of halved and split up, and by the time we were done with X-Men and moving on, Marvel had part of a deal with Sony. Marvel had part of a deal with all the rights to all the characters were it's terribly complicated.
Yeah.
Terribly complicated. So about 5 years ago, I was looking at the calendar going, well, the anniversary of X-Men is coming up.
The animated show.
Of the animated series. And there's no studio or company behind it like Batman has Warner Brothers or Star Trek has Paramount. And then it's, if we don't do it, it's not going to get done. So I kept poking him.
Yeah, to get this book
done. And he made this book.
So because we try to call Marvel, and they say, oh look, 20th Century Fox has half the rights. Marvel who's just been bought by Disney has half the rights. They hate each other. They're competitors. They're not going to do a book about old show there, no matter how many fans are there, no matter how many books would sell. They're not going to want to help each other, so that we're not even going to talk to you about it. So we did this first book without their participation.
We were able to because 1992, everything was on paper, and we just took every note, every storyboard, every script, put them in boxes, and we'd stored them above a garage.
Okay.
And then 20 years later, you went spelunking and found all the stuff.
Yeah, we dug through, and we were able to use a certain amount of stuff as fair use stuff, anything that had been a promotional material, that sort of thing. But an awful lot of things that if you and going to write a book about a show, you need the participation of the people that own the rights.
Yeah. Because
they allow you to use all the beautiful color, anything off the screen, like a screen grab, all the color artwork, anything. We couldn't even use the scripts that I polished all 76 of because they were the property of the lawyer. Yeah. I could use an excerpt like a scholar, could pull a paragraph or something. I could do that. But none of that stuff belonged to us, even though we had it in our garage.
Right.
we
Legally.
crafted a 400-plus page
we did
book.
The book anyway, and they didn't fight us about it. I mean, they could have come down on us.
It's been nice for us. It's been an entree for us to get to go to cons and fests because, like we're not artists, we can't draw you something quick. But having this book, it's been a wonderful last year and a half going to cons and festivals, and for us, the first time seeing folks who the show meant so much to. And then you got a call.
Right. I did this then about a year ago. About a year ago, just when Fox and Disney were getting all the rights together for everything, Disney was bought so that all the X-Men rights would be back together again for the first time in 10 years. We get an email from the head of Marvel International Licensing, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to sue us for doing this book without our permission. And it wasn't that. It was no. Everybody, we said, look, we read your book. Everybody in the office loves your book, but you said you weren't able to use any of the artwork or any of the, there's all sorts of stuff that you couldn't do because Marvel wasn't behind you. But we can get Marvel behind you, and we can do a complimentary book that's all about the look of the thing. It's all about the art. Big coffee table book. That's all an art book.
Okay.
And as you got 200,000 words of history in that first one. Have the second one be almost all pictures and just little bits of, connected to it. And then people can have both of them. They could read all the detail of what went on, and then they could see all the beautiful stuff that they remember from the book. So
now the catch was 30 years had gone by, and there was no centralized storage of this material. So we had to go.
There was no archive. We had to go to artists' basements and
2 really unpleasant storage units. Wow. Scary.
Yeah, and digging around because people just used to throw this stuff away. It's like Golden Age comic books.
Yeah.
Our dear friend Len Wein told a story about when he was a teenager in New York.
Sorry about this.
And he was working for I guess DC or Marvel. Then it was the 60s. And one of the things that he and his other teenagers were told to do is that, look, there's a stack of original Golden Age artwork over there, hundreds and hundreds. Throw that all away, please, because they didn't know. They didn't know it was worth it. It was just taking up storage room. Wow. And these hand painted animation cells from the show, most people just threw them away. In the days before that, you used to wash the cells. Mm-hmm. As soon as you were done with them, you'd wash the paint off so you could use the plastic again.
Wow. Oh, just Len Wein's story. Just a quick, the capper on that.
The capper on that. He and his buddies were horrified they're going to throw this away, so they pretended to throw it away. And then
they threw it away.
And then they went down to the dumpster after work, and all back out again.
There you go.
Shared it all among their friends. So they caught that, but an awful lot of the stuff is lost forever.
And a lot of the animation cells, they're not designed to last. So they crack, they peel, the paint chips, it sticks to everything.
And this was before things went digital. So first X-Men show actually was shot on film and cut on film, and they were just starting to do video editing, and it was very expensive.
But okay, but your point and what we're talking about now is that with the help of several artists on the show and a couple of the producers who themselves were just casual collectors because things were getting cleared out and they threw it all in boxes, we have been able to craft the new book, which is being called X-Men: The Art and Making of the Animated Series.
Right.
And this is a tiny picture of it.
This is a tiny picture. It's got the front and the back of it on. You can see it. It's already listed on Amazon.
Yes.
Nice.
And the new artwork is by guys that worked on the show, by Larry Houston and Rick Hoberg, who are 2 of the 4 main artists on the show.
They designed the cover and the back just for this book.
Just for the book. And there's some more original stuff in it, but mostly it's historical bits showing you how an animated show got made back then, how the mouths moved, how all the stuff you have to ship overseas and have it come back looking like something.
Yeah, 300 pages, glorious color. Comes out October 20th.
October 20th.
Can be pre-ordered on Amazon, or Abrams Books has it on their catalog page. You can go there.
Okay.
And if you like the show, boy, howdy, this book is just going to bring tears to your eyes.
Look sharp. Good. The first book has all the dirt on everybody.
That's what we want, right?
And everything that went on behind the scenes. But the second book has all the beautiful pictures.
Might I call them really nice companion pieces?
Yeah, most definitely. So October 20th is when it drops. We can, you said, on Abrams as well as Amazon. We can pre-order it right now, and we can go grab that. So most definitely, I'll be covering all of that on my channel. We'll take a look at that. I know my audience is going to love that. I want to veer in this direction just because, again, the hype of the animated series has just been insane because of, like I said, Disney Plus, it being introduced and giving us a one-stop shop, digital shop.
Finally.
Just we don't have to try to piece it up, go try to find this box with all the wait for it to come on TV. We can just right there on our televisions, on our phones, whatever, PCs, we can view it in its entirety and see it in context, not seeing it in these isolated episodes. So I'm seeing so many people talk about it, and I want to know what you guys' experience has been surrounding that, because it's being talked about so much again, and it's sort of this like revitalized sort of support for it. So I know people have been reaching out to you guys. I know you've been hearing people's appreciation for what's that whole entire experience like when, I guess starting when you guys even found out that it was going to be on Disney Plus and it was going to be a one-stop shop for everybody.
Well, I'll tell you, it was always kind of frustrating since the show wrapped, and then it wrapped in 97, and then it ran on, was it Jetix? It was on Disney when you were a little bit older.
Yep.
They did the run then. So there's kind of like two chunks of people of a certain age who hit it when it was coming out the first time, and then when it was running on the Disney Channel then. And then maybe you could find a DVD, maybe of one or two of the seasons. There was never a box set released in the US, and that always hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you went on Amazon, paid $2.99 per episode, which I always felt was a bit egregious, and then you couldn't find it anywhere. Hearing that Disney was kind of buying the world and that they may come together on this and there may be a new home for X-Men on the Disney Plus channel, that was thrilling. Just the idea that it could be somewhere finally that fans could go look at it again.
Yeah, and we started going to cons a lot with what, as soon as the book came out in November of 2017.
Okay.
Started booking about a con a month, and there we were able to meet people a little older than you,
mm-hmm.
age, and then even younger, and we got this amazing sense that all over the world the show played and played and played, and it became a show that people could fall in love with, and that was incredibly gratifying because we just work at home, we just work at our desk.
Even then, it was a home office,
and we crank out the scripts, and when we're done with a show, we just go on to the next one. It's the next gig,
mm-hmm.
and you don't get back and forth with the people that are watching your work, and then suddenly we're at like WonderCon a little over a year ago, and there's 1,700 people in the audience,
standing room only,
and they're just going on about how it was their show and how much it meant to them and it made their childhood, and that sort of thing is just really gratifying. It just really knocks you over and makes you realize why you do this. And we've each worked on dozens of shows,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes we do, good work, bad work in between, but
you try and do your best always.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it connects with people and sometimes it doesn't. And it's just kind of a mystical thing. It's how, I don't know, it's a mystery.
Yeah.
But when it does, it's a special thing because we have our favorite shows. We have shows or music, that just blew us away, has stayed with us our whole lives. And to have done something that has stayed with other people their whole lives is really special.
Yeah. That's amazing to hear. And I'm glad people, with social media, it's allowed us to connect, right? As much as we've ever been able to, and to be able to connect with people that obviously appreciate you guys' work, such as myself. It's amazing. It's amazing for myself to be able to reach out to you guys and even have you guys be part of the show and talk to you about it all. But I can only imagine just, you seeing it in person and going to cons and hearing people, tell you about their experience. That has to be, overwhelming. I think it would be for me because in my band that I'm in, when people go, hey, I listen to this, that's one thing. But you guys had something that stuck with a couple of different generations of youngsters, man, and they're now my age, a little older as well. And so you got this big pool of people that have come to love your stuff, and I can only imagine how awesome that has to be.
It's great, and they share it now. That they share it with their kids now. The 40-year-old parents bringing their 3 kids, and the 3 kids are all cosplaying from our show.
Or we'll have,
and it just knocks you over.
We'll have a 20, 30 something who said, "No, I watched this with my grandmother. She loved this show." It's like, oh my God,
that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. You guys, you mentioned, and I wanted to bring this up earlier. I forgot though, but you guys mentioned that first initial meeting.
Yeah.
Stan Lee was a part of it. So I want to know the experience with him. Unfortunately, he recently passed, but I want to know the experience of him. And if you even along the way, after the fact, even after the show, did you guys have any other conversations with him? And what was that like? What was he like?
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is we worked with him since then, and on other projects. Whatever you thought Stan Lee was like, that really was what he was like.
Yeah.
His personality just filled the room.
He was on all the time.
Yeah.
When we started, he was nearly 70, and he had more energy than any other people in the room.
Right.
And was a driven guy. Was a constantly creative guy.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for him, he was in a little bit of a between things there. He had come up, he started working in the 40s, put in his dues during the 50s, and then suddenly about 1960 through 1970, it's like everything he touched turned to gold.
Gold, yeah.
The entire world was overwhelmed with dozens of stuff. I mean, and then after that, he was gradually less and less involved with the comic books, but he was incredibly smart about keeping his name everywhere, self-promotion, and keeping himself so people have the sense that he that he did 90% of Marvel's comics for 40 years. It's not true.
Yeah, not at all. Not even with the X-Men. I mean, it's
war here. I mean, he did X-Men for a year in 1973, but then other people took over and ran with it. But so he has been this unique force in the business. And as Julia mentioned, we worked on a couple other things later at Deke Enterprises with him on things. And we were even hired to do some work when he had his own Stanley website. Yeah, we had a Stanley website that he went into. People took advantage of him on that, kind of took his money, and that went south. But it was fun working with him while we had a chance. For X-Men itself, we had a bit of a problem. What the Marvel people we dealt with in 1992 pulled us aside and said, "Look, Stan hasn't really been involved in the books for about 10 years now."
Well, and remember what the original X-Men that he created were the teenagers, the four kids at the school.
Right, and that he really hadn't kept up with the current books, and that in his mind, the X-Men were teenagers in a school.
Right.
They weren't Wolverine. They weren't Storm.
They weren't Wolverine or Storm or Colossus or Gambit or any of these more modern characters that had happened since the rebirth of the book in 1975. People forget that the X-Men kind of petered out and died. It lasted in the 60s and then it stopped. They just went into rebirths for 5 years because it just wasn't quite gelling. It wasn't working. And then Len Wein and Chris Claremont, a couple other people, got together and brought it back to life. And when they did, it was older, tougher, nasty,
grittier. Yeah.
Characters were older, had a completely new tone. It was like post-Vietnam. It was post-Watergate. It was like a new era, and comic books everywhere had gotten more intense. And so we found ourselves. This is one of the biggest struggles while we're trying to get the show written. About 3 months in, and suddenly, Margaret Lash, who's the head of the Fox Network's getting a lot of pressure from Stan saying, I don't know about these scripts. I don't know about these characters. This isn't the X-Men I know. And he was giving a lot of pressure on her. And we actually had a big come to Jesus meeting with the head of the entire Fox Network.
Yeah.
And Stan was saying, look, I want a different show. I want to run the show. I want to narrate the show. I want to introduce the show. And he wanted to take it a very, very different direction. And us agreed with him. But he was such a respected guy. And there's a chapter in my book that says, how do you say no to Stan Lee?
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so we had this big meeting, and I just had to look at the head of the entire studio and say, look, we've developed it this way, and we put 3 months of our lives into it. If Stan wants to take it in another direction, it's your money. Let me go. I'll give up the best job I ever had. But, you just have to decide. One of us needs to be in charge of this, because he's been trying to kind of from the side and whisper in Margaret's ear and get her to change the show. And luckily, Will Mineo, who knew Stan well, he's our supervising producer, a wonderful artist, and who fought all the tough fights for us politically. Yeah. He said, look, I'll talk to Stan. I'll talk to Eric. I'll work it out so that they can live together.
Yeah.
And he did that, and he showed Stan some respect. And so we did that for a few weeks. He calmed Stan down. When the show came out and it was this huge hit, nobody wanted anything changed anyway, so it'd be a problem. But he got Stan on board and got him feeling like he was part of it and that he was
being heard.
And yet we didn't really change the essence of the show. That it was a tough 2-3 weeks there where we didn't know if A, we were going to still be hired the next day, and B, if the show was going to stay the way we had been developing it for the 3. And that all came from Stan. He's so confident. He's so ambitious. He's so driven. He never wants to not be working and running things.
Right.
And to his credit, he's done so many things well. You got to listen to him.
Yeah.
But he was just the wrong. We're in the 90s, and his mind was in the 60s.
Right.
On this particular thing, and I looked to the head of the studio. I said, "Look, I appreciate Pat Boone music, but we're in grunge band time.
Yeah.
And our audience is not gonna want something as gentle as those books were back in 1963, and that's what Stan's instincts are. And I can't do something that I think should be bad for the show, even for Stan.
Right.
And so we worked it through, worked out. Everybody's happy.
Yes.
Stan got to be part of it, just like he got to be part of the movies. I mean, he didn't have a say in any of the movies. He didn't write anything for the movies, but he's there always listed. He's always listed.
Right, always.
Yeah.
Out of respect. And the same thing we did for our show. But yeah, that was interesting. That was not an easy month for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, like I say, he created essentially the property, but yeah, definitely if you go from his era to that initial era, more so to going into the Claremont era, it is a different feel, even with some of the same characters. The retcon of Professor X and Magneto, that French, that wasn't a thing really, back when he was writing the book. So I could imagine him. How do you say, what is that? Now I'm intrigued by it, because how in the world would you? I could imagine me trying to write a book and then Stan Lee's like, look, man, I want to go this direction with it, because this is how I would do it. How in the world did you manage to navigate that to not only at least, calm them down, make them happy to be a part of it, while also being able to make your own vision come to life with that?
And yet, at the end of it all, we still remain friends and continue to work with him and for him.
That was the key thing. Is when you're Hollywood's a tough place. I mean, any jobs are tough, but so many good, talented, ambitious people are thrown together.
Yeah.
And you can say things and do things that'll burn bridges. And if you're smart and if you have a certain amount of strength and foresight, you don't let yourself do that. You let yourself stand as firm as you possibly can, but stay respectful. And in this case, we had this wonderful guy that was our diplomat that rode herd on this problem and got us to where we were kind of speaking the same language and off doing what we were doing. And it just, he helped diffuse that. And I don't think I could have done it by myself. Yeah. I mean, I don't think just me and Stan in a room, I don't know that we would have ever gotten past it. So that was, luckily you got enough good people in your family there pulling for a successful show. And he had that, Will had the skill to navigate that.
Quick tip here too, as we're speaking about X-Men the Animated Series, Will Mineo, Larry Houston, and Margaret Lesh had all worked on a project that precedes X-Men Animated Series, that a pilot balloon kind of thing called Pride of the X-Men. Many people may not be aware of it, but a lot of people are. And that was produced at Marvel in an effort to try and excite folks to do an X-Men show. And there were so many talented people, but that was the one that had too many cooks in the kitchen. And it did not work ultimately. Right. So when you had Will and Larry and Margaret, now Margaret at Fox and Larry and Will working on the X-Men project, you'd had people who'd been burned by bad decisions made by people who shouldn't make those decisions, and were determined to, okay, this is our last stand.
Yeah, we're going to stand firm on this. Whereas, a lot of times, you're struggling in the middle of a project, and you say, well, am I being too bullheaded, or should I just give on this one? And and at this point, they'd watched what they thought was going to be a good X-Men show not work. And they knew what had screwed it up. They knew that, people's idea, let's make Wolverine Australian because Crocodile Dundee is a big hit this year.
And that's why he's Australian in that show.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Or we want to sell a lot of toys, so let's put 30, 40 different X-Men people in this 20-minute story where you can't tell one from the other.
Right.
And you don't care.
And so they would, like marketing people or would make decisions like that. And the creative people have put up with it. Yeah. And all the creative people were just ready to draw the line in the sand on this one and said, no, it's going to ruin the show. Sorry, you got to trust us. If we're wrong, you can fire us, but you got to trust us because we're not going to change it.
There you go. Well, I want to end with this, and I know you guys see the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
That is becoming more and more prominent. It's like they can't not make $1 billion film at this at this point, no matter how good or even bad it is. It's just pumping out these very, very successful films. Now, I don't want to limit it to that, but do you guys have any future maybe aspirations to either write future X-Men material, be it in TV or even other Marvel characters? Is that something that possibly, let's say if it was thrown at you and it worked out for you guys, the scheduling and all of that, is that something that you guys would be interested in doing?
I keep saying Disney, call it up.
We've had that talk with the cast and the artists.
That's true. The voice talent
and the writers.
Yeah.
And it's a cool thing. It's for animation. It doesn't matter that you were 35 before,
exactly,
and you're 65 now. Your voice is still good. So everybody, I'd say out of 40 people I contacted, 1 or 2 were lukewarm about the experience. The other 38 said it was the best job they ever had.
Yeah.
So of course they want to do it. And of course they could, they use the gig and use the money. But we'd all love to give it another shot.
Yes. My
feeling is that now that Marvel and Disney are together and Kevin Feige has a chance, they're going to say, okay, we're going to do a new generation of X-Men.
Yes.
And that's fine.
And we'd love to be one of the groups of people gets a stab at that, but I think these things tend to come in generations, and
Absolutely.
I think they tend to have their younger folks that have a new idea for it that they'd like to try. But believe me, if they would give us a try, we'd bust our ass to make another good show.
I'm pretty sure you guys will knock that absolutely out the park. We got to make sure we try to make that happen, because I would love to see another stab at it, definitely. Because again, there's been other X-Men, like definitely animated material.
Sure.
If we talk about that, but it's not to say that they've been terrible. It's just they don't stay. Like, we're always going to go back to the original. We're going to go back to the animated series, no matter what. It's like that's what we see. And now with the more technological advancements that we have, and the experience, I think you guys would absolutely, just absolutely kill it. And you'd have multiple generations of people that would love to see it. And I don't know what the holdup is, considering that we're in this like technologically advanced sort of age where stuff can get pumped out a lot more quicker. Maybe the creative process is still there, but it can get pumped out a lot quicker. And they see the sample size now with the people that just are still going to the animated series. They're still preferring that over the mountains of that. Was again, I was a kid. I'll be 30 years old next month. This was when I was a child when this came out. Yet people are still gravitating towards that, and we see it not just looking at it as like peak X-Men, right? A lot of us look at it, and I talked about this on my channel on the videos that I did for the episodes that I was watching. We consider it like peak animation, like peak American animation. You know what I mean? Just top down, it's just awesome, and it transcends generations, and that's what makes some of the greatest cartoons the greatest cartoons. Because no matter what, I was a kid, none of the Flintstones or Jetsons or any of that stuff came out when I was a kid, but I watched it then. I thought it was amazing. I could watch it now, and I'm like, this is the best stuff ever. It just transcends generations, and that's what we see with X-Men, the animated series. So I hope to God that we can make that happen. I want you guys to get a shot.
The DC universe, the way they've handled it with their home DVD movies, I've always thought, Marvel.
That's an opportunity, and they're killing it right now. I just did a video talking about how they're absolutely, knocking that out of the park with some of those animated films. Yes. And it's a similar thing where it's like they're taking they clearly got guys that are part of those projects that have either wrote the books themselves, or they're at least part of the projects, and we're seeing like them have these sort of like the source material is so highly respected, which is why a lot of people prefer that over DC's like live action stuff.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
And Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse just blew the top of my head off. That was astonishing, and considering that's available, I mean that kind of animation is available now. It's like, whoa!
You guys would kill it.
Just imagine what we could do that.
Get that done for us. Eric.
Yes, I got you. I will absolutely make that happen. I'll be working on that. Well, again, Julia and Eric, I appreciate both of you guys joining us again for my audience. October the 20th, the new book. What is the title of it? One more time.
It is the art. It's called Good Old X-Men, the art and making of the animated series.
The art and making of the animated series. And the one that's already out?
You can find it on Amazon and on Abrams. Mm-hmm. Also, if I could
the original book.
The original book.
Yes.
Previously on X-Men.
The making of the animated series.
Find that on Amazon, or Jacobs Brown Media Group is where that one got published. If I can do a shout out for us on social media, we met through Twitter.
Yes.
Which is where we are at X-Men TAS, which is for X-Men, the animated series. Mm-hmm. We got Twitter. We have a website, X-Men TAS, that we are currently in the process of renovating. Give us a little time on that, but we do stuff there. We have an Instagram page that we got to get more on board with that.
I'm right there with you. I got to get more on board with my own page. Everybody's telling me.
On Facebook, we have previously on X-Men is our Facebook page. But please, on Twitter, I'm on there way too much every day.
Every day.
So
hours and hours.
Awesome.
Yeah, but that was a way for us to kind of get a sense that people remember the show and it really meant something to them. So that's been very gratifying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, again, I appreciate you guys joining us. Again, if you guys want to listen to the entire episode of the show, you can visit forcanorsake.com. Again, that's going to be forcanorsake.com. And of course, this podcast is live on all major digital platforms.
That's going to do it for today's episode of For Canon's Sake with Eric July. Be sure to keep it locked for the best mix of comics and, of course, social commentary you'll ever hear. And I mean, ever hear. To get caught up or contact the show, please be sure to visit forcanonsake.com.